Hi, I'm Amos from Moog Music, and I'm here to talk about the new firmware version 1.0.2 update for the Moog One. This was just released online earlier today, so you can download it now from the moogmusic.com website. And firmware version 1.0.2 is primarily designed to address some of the the initial feedback that we got from the first round of users out there in the field who are using this instrument. We have a lot of new features that are lined up to continue to introduce in upcoming firmware updates. But right now, let me just go through sort of the headline features, the additions and changes in this update, and then I'll talk some about the issues that we're still tracking, that we are currently working on or planning to work on in the near future. And I'll take your questions, and if anybody has any concerns about anything that we have mentioned or haven't mentioned, let us know. Our goal is to stay super engaged and focused and make sure that we're able to deliver the best possible experience with this instrument. So the number one feature that has been added in the new firmware version is fan mode, as it's called. And the fan mode is a way of adding some extra control to the temperature control system that runs inside the Moog One, because we've heard from some people in some environments that the cooling fans were louder than they wanted them to be, or running more frequently than they wanted them to, or basically not staying in the background and being unobtrusive, which was the design goal, and which I think we've delivered a much more enjoyable, in the sense of not being noticed particularly, a much more unobtrusive cooling algorithm in the temperature control system. So in very simple terms, on the hardware settings menu now, there is an option called fan mode, and it has two settings, normal and low. And the normal setting is what we shipped originally. It's what folks are used to. And if you haven't had any concerns about the fans, you can just hold what you got, leave it like it is, everything will be just the same. If you want to experiment with a quieter fan mode, set it to low. And we've done a ton of time and temperature studies. We're confident that we're still maintaining an internal temperature that is well within the safety margin. There's no issues with reliability or longevity. We're just running the fans more quietly and over a wider range of conditions. So I can show now on the screen here. You go to hardware settings, scroll down to fan mode. Very simple, two settings, normal and low. And our recommendation for the low setting is that basically anything that approximates room temperature up to about 25 degrees C, we would recommend the low mode. And the fans run at a sort of a constant whisper quiet level that ideally is not going to be noticeable in most environments. It'll be below the sort of ambient noise threshold of the room. So please try that out if you have had any of these concerns, and let us know what you think. We're very happy with the results there. Moving on, I have a exhaustively cataloged post-it note of all of the changes and fixes that we have here. The other big headline feature that we've added is dynamic control of the noise floor, the background noise level of the instrument. Just that analog noise that is there when you're not playing notes. We're now dynamically, essentially ducking that per voice when you're not playing. And it's very subtle. It's not a hard on-off. It's just a subtle attenuation that follows the amplitude of the voices that you're playing, and the end result is use all the voices, all the sound sources without any unpleasant clipping. As a result of that huge dynamic range, if you're playing the quietest possible sound, like one single triangle oscillator with the filter closed all the way down, while that note is playing, that's still going to be the least forgiving situation in terms of the amount of noise that you're going to hear. But as our customers have been reporting to us, as they get to know the instrument, proper gain staging really gives you a huge area to work with where you can get a really hot signal, really quiet noise, and really good quality recordings. But this tweak to the sort of dynamic control of that background noise floor is it's really made a nice difference, and we've had nothing but good feedback on that so far. And that is simply an automatic feature of firmware version 1.0.2. Load it up, try out your favorite sounds, use your same signal chain that you've been using, or keep dialing that in. This will help a lot, I think, to get the best quality recordings that you're going to get out of this. Moving on down the list of new features, there was another issue that we were tracking where as you were changing presets from one preset to another, you could get some artifacts in the effects system. That was a result of, for example, there still being some audio in the delay buffer from the old sound that wasn't flushed out of that delay buffer when you switch over to the new sound. So you'd get a little bit of a kind of a hangover of the previous sound that was in the delay in your new preset audio right when the preset changed. And it was a little disconcerting and funny sounding, and we've done a number of things to clean that up. So number one, the delay buffers are cleared when you switch presets and when you switch effects presets. Number two, things like the tape delay. Tape delay has a lag when you do a speed change, when you do a delay time change, which is designed to emulate the motors of an actual physical tape system speeding up and slowing down. It gives a really nice distinctive effect when you're changing it on purpose, but that was another thing that when you were changing presets, there would be some slew or lag on the delay time of a tape delay as it set the new time for the new preset. That has been cleaned up. Overall, I think right now I'm very happy with most of the sonic consequences that you get when you change presets. Just to point out, it's not perfect. There's still some room for improvement. An example that you might run across is if you're switching between two presets that both use an eventide black hole algorithm with very different settings from one preset to the next. Because that's using the same effects algorithm and you're just whacking the parameters around, there's a little bit of slewing that you can hear. You can hear a little bit of the black hole algorithm changing dynamically as you change presets. That's a little bit of a deeper problem to tackle, but we're on top of it. We're going to continue to make improvements there. I think what we've introduced in this version is still a night and day improvement. It's just going to keep getting better. There were a couple of just simple bug fixes that are included in 1.0.2. These were on the known issues list from the last firmware update, so we can strike those off the list. Number one is legato glide. Legato glide is something that happens when you are in mono mode, and I'll just turn on glide, load a little init preset here, and I have not sound checked since booting this instrument up, so if I don't get any sound, that's why. There we go. Hey, neat. So that's glide happening all the time. If you go to the left-hand controller more page, there's a legato glide parameter. It's been there all along. And what that does is it puts a glide only between notes that are played connected, overlapping each other. So if you play two notes and you don't overlap them, there's no glide, but if you overlap them, and that was me actually playing incorrectly. The bug has been fixed. Legato glide always works on legato notes, always doesn't glide on non-legato notes. So strike that one off the list, that is fixed. And the other simple bug fix in this version is to the oscillator note-on reset. And that might be a little bit more difficult to demonstrate on the fly just because it's a very subtle, sound, but if you need it and you want that in your music, you gotta have it. So the basic idea is analog VCOs like the Moog One uses are free running. It means they're always oscillating all the time, and the phase of those oscillators, where they are in their cycle at any given moment, it is what it is, and when you start a note and you open the volume envelope, you start hearing that oscillator at whatever phase it happens to be at, and there's nothing, there's no fixed relationship between the phase of the oscillator and the attack of the note, and that's normal. That's what everything since the original modular Moogs have done. However, really with the advent of digital synths, this became commonplace. There was always a trick where you could take the gate voltage of a keyboard and apply it to the hard sync input of an oscillator and kind of manually reset the phase of the oscillator at node on. But long story short, that's what we're doing with the node on reset parameter. So I'm going to attempt to dial up a 2 oscillator sound. Got the filter all the way open so you can hear those oscillators beating against each other. And yeah, I'm not going to belabor this, but essentially if you've got 2 oscillators that are very close in frequency to each other, then the phase relationship between those oscillators occurs over a fairly long period of time. So about every 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds there, you know, if you've got good hearing, good speakers, whatever, you can hear there's some high frequency content that's rising and falling, and that's created by the phase relationship between the oscillators. And as you play notes, that phase relationship, it keeps cycling over 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, whatever it is. And with the result that the attack of every note is slightly different than the attack of every other note in terms of how the envelope and the oscillator waveform interact with each other. It's maybe a little bit easier to hear with low nodes. Anyway, if we turn on node on reset for these 2 oscillators, which I'm doing right now, then the phase of those oscillators is reset to the same point on node on, so you should get a more consistent sound to the attack. Every attack should have the same punch, the same sort of phase as every other attack, which is really good for sequenced bass lines, really rhythmic sounds, things like that. So again, that's something that it'll become apparent how useful that is in your own music if you need it. I'm not confident that I'm giving the perfect demo of it here on the fly, but I think I've explained the concept well enough. So I'll keep rolling with more updates. Next on the list is we added fine adjustment, fine-tuning resolution to the SVF, the state variable filter spacing parameter. So if you go to the filters section more page, the first soft knob there is SVF spacing, and what that does is it provides an offset in frequency between one of the 2 state variable filter sections and the other. By default, they're both on exactly the same cutoff frequency, which is set by the cutoff knob on the front panel. They both track that. The SVF spacing is an offset for the second of the 2 state variable filters. They both still always track the cutoff, but you can create an offset so that one of them is here, one of them is here, and then they sweep with that offset maintained between them. And that offset is in semitones, and the resolution was, you know, it was coarse. There was only one resolution of editing for that. And now, like many other parameters that have fine editing, if the shift function is activated while you turn that soft knob, you can now change that spacing in 0.1% units, which is basically 1 cent if the unit is semitones. So you now have very, very fine control over the exact spacing between your SVF filter sections. And that can be really nice if you're doing you know, sort of vocal sounds or anything where you really want to have very subtle sculpting of those SVF sections. You can now dial that in much more finely. Moving on down the list, very, very trivial-ish bug fix, but you may or may not have noticed by now that the Save button on the front panel, if you first load a preset, that Save button is dark. So if I just go to any preset here, the Save button turns, you know, goes dark. And if you turn any knobs or edit the sound, if you do anything that would change the sound in a way that would require saving, the Save button lights up dimly to let you know that you have a dirty edit buffer and you might want to take a snapshot or save the preset if you want to save your changes. There was a small bug that if you imported a timbre from one preset into the current preset, that action didn't light up the Save button to let you know that something needed saving, but obviously that's a big change. So that now, there's a small visual cue that is consistent now for swapping different timbres into different synths in your current preset. we made a change to the resonator effect. Previously, the resonator did not have a wet-dry mix. If it was in the insert path, it was 100% wet all the time. In fact, for sound design, it can be very nice to blend in some of the dry signal with the output of the resonator. So we simply added a wet-dry mix. It works just like wet-dry mix on any other insert effect. 100% wet is the effect output, 100% dry is the signal going into that effect. And that will add significantly to the kinds of sounds that you can sculpt using the resonator as a tool. There was another small change to the sequence browser. If you're in the sequencer more page, you can load saved sequences. And it happened to be the case that you could not press the main encoder switch to load those effects presets the way you can to load sequence presets the way you can with effects presets and with regular full sound presets. So we've just made navigation a little bit more consistent. You can now press the encoder on the sequence browser and load your sequences that way, the same as you can on all the other browsers. All right. There was also a small bug fix on the XY pad. This was a little bit subtle. You had to have there's an option to load the saved position for the left-hand controls. You can load the mod wheel position, you can load the XY position, or both or neither. And it happened to be the case that if you were not loading the XY position, then there's a small bug that could happen on preset load where it would load with the wrong polarity or just give you slightly quirky behavior. I'm hoping no one noticed that except for us here in-house, and I hope that that continues to be true for new bugs, but that is fixed, and all the load saved position options, just load the mod wheel position, just load the pad positions, load both, load neither, all working correctly with no unpleasant side effects. Almost to the end of the list, there were about a dozen fixes and additions in this build, and then I'll quickly go over the things that we are looking most closely at coming up. There was a bug introduced in 1.0.1. Sorry about that. This was when we introduced the ability to disable synths from the current preset, meaning stop allocating any voices to them, mute them, turn them off. And there was a small voice allocation bug where, let's say you started with the init preset and all of the synths in that, all the layers were set to all available voices in their polyphony settings. If you muted one of those synths, if you disabled it, it could stop one of the other synths that should have still been active from playing. That's now fixed. You can mute and unmute synth parts to your heart's content, and they will behave the way they're supposed to. So let's see. And lastly and leastly, there was a request to be able to turn the poly count of an individual synth to 0, as opposed to having 1 being the minimum. Again, that overlaps a little bit with the concept I was just talking about of disabling the synth dynamically from the home page. But some people, it just makes more sense to their way of working. They want to go to the polyphony menu and set it to 0 if they want a synth to not use voices. No reason why we couldn't offer both options, so we did. And in general, as long as it doesn't create confusion, I'm happy for this instrument to sort of work with lots of different people's modalities, different ways of interacting with an instrument. It's not going to be all things to all people, but if it can be as accessible as possible to the widest number of people and their styles of working, that's a good thing. So we added that extra option just for people who find that a more logical way of working. So it works just the same way as disabling a synth in terms of no voices are assigned to it. All those voices are available for other synths. Excuse me. So that's the list of fixes. I'm going to pause right now and catch up with some of the questions that have been coming in. Thanks very much for participating. Thanks for asking questions. So actually, some of these overlap with the list of things that we're still looking at. So no worries. I'll address them in whatever order they come. So the number one question that came in is, can we please address the effects gain issues? Will this be fixed soon? Yes, I do know what you're talking about. So the digital effects, the gain staging of those effects when you're using them versus when you're not using them, when you bring them in or out or adjust the mix level, a lot of things have to be right in order for that to sound correct, keep your signal levels where you want them to be, and give you the best sound quality and the best user experience as you're performing. and we know we do still have some work to do on that. We have been, cataloging exactly what needs to change, and testing and listening, and we've been getting your feedback. We get emails with really nice detailed descriptions of what's happening versus what should be happening. Honestly, the more of that, the better. Like, if you have identified exactly something that isn't the way you think it should be, and you can tell us how it is, and you can tell us how it should be, I know that that takes time and effort on your part to convey that information, but it's really helpful, it's really worth it, and it's very appreciated. So thanks very much to everybody who has written in with precise descriptions of what they're seeing versus what they'd like to see. The more of that, the better, and the more of those kind of, the more of that kind of feedback we get, the more it helps us to deliver the solutions that you need in a timely fashion. So thank you, and please keep that up. And as far as effects gain, yes, we're absolutely working on that. And right now, I'm still in the process of, we collectively are still in the process of scheduling what is going to go into the next update and how soon that'll happen. So I can't promise exactly when that specific fix is going to be added to the mix, but it is coming soon. I would say it's actively in development. Okay, next question. Are there plans for us to be able to use the VCOs as mod sources? I'm going to say no, not right now. There are not plans to do that, and there are reasons. It's not just because we don't like VCOs and don't think they should be mod sources. VCOs are awesome, and audio rate modulation is awesome, but the way the modulation engine in the Moog One is set up is that there are certain hardwired modulation paths that we can do at full audio rate. And those are like the dedicated filter FM, oscillator FM, the envelopes, that is to say the hardwired envelope paths like volume envelope to the VCA, filter envelope to the filter. Essentially, we architected in a certain number of audio rate modulation paths, but the totally flexible mod matrix where you have, I don't even remember, 37 sources and 85 destinations and counting as we add more, that whole system isn't able to convey all of the harmonics of the oscillators because of its update rate, which is not terrible. It's in the kilohertz, it's 5K, 8K, something like. I don't want to promulgate misinformation, but the point is, it is updated several thousand times a second, but not several tens of thousands of times a second, which is what you'd want to really use an oscillator in all of its glory as a freely assignable mod source. So you can use the oscillators as a mod source for the filter. You can use the oscillators as a mod source for another oscillator using the FM routes that are already in there. But as far as the VCOs being freely assignable, I mean, potentially, possibly, I'm going out on a limb here. I think it's not technically impossible that we could throw them into the mod matrix and see what happens, and just with the caveat that it's, it will be what it is. That's a tricky one. We debate these things a lot. There is a camp that says just let people make whatever sounds are physically possible, and some people are going to like it, some people are going to get musical results out of it, even if it's like from some technical level it's weird or quirky or has is subject to criticism. And then there's the other camp that says only do things that are perfectly amazing, and if it's subject to criticism, maybe don't do that. And so we have to strike a balance. Let people do quirky, weird stuff that someone is inevitably going to like, versus someone else might do the same thing and say, I can't believe they let this synth make that stupid sound. What were they thinking? It's all music, it's all sound, so we just have to try to strike the right balance to create a total experience that is positive in the ways we want it to be. So we'll look at that. We'll review it and see what we think of the result. Keeping going with the questions, we got a question about overdrive. For overdrive, somebody saw somebody else say that you could use the constant mod source to push the oscillator past the max available, I assume that's mixer level, by the dedicated knobs. Is that true? I literally don't know if that's true. I have never tried that, but we can try it right here and right now, live on the air, and we will see what happens. All right, so this is one sawtooth oscillator. This is the init preset. Turned it all the way up in the mixer. Filter's all the way open. it sounds like that. If we go into the mod matrix and we create a modulation, I'm going to set the source to be constant, which is the last option on the list, and I'm going to set the destination. I'll go to the mixer section, and I'll say oscillator 1 level. So there's that. You can certainly turn it down all the way. I am not convinced that it was getting louder as I went above 100%, but maybe it did just a little bit. I don't know. It's certainly not a game changer. It's not like there's an overdrive pedal hiding in the mod matrix just by using that, that routing. But feel free to experiment with it. Some parameters can be overmodulated and others cannot. Other parameters clip at whatever their maximum is. And basically, if this is going back to what I was saying about let people do goofy stuff if it's cool versus not letting that happen. Generally, if it's cool to let a parameter be overmodulated, we allow that. If it's goofy and sounds bad, then we limit what the maximum can be. So I'm not 100% sure what the case is on this one. I'll have to consult with my colleagues, and maybe I can follow up on that once I know more. But certainly, trying it out, maybe it was doing something, but if so, it was subtle. Okay, more questions. I'm going to skip the first one that just got added. I'll take it later. The next one is there a limit on the mod matrix capacity? There are two answers to that question. Number one answer is right now, today, there is a limit of 20 mod slots per synth, per timbre. So each preset can have up to 60 freely assignable modulations in the mod matrix, but they're divided up. Each timbre can only get 20 at a time. And additionally, sort of using the same modulation engine as the sequencer, each of the 3 sequencers can have up to 20 parameter per step modulations in the sequencer. So yeah, you've got 120 some freely assignable modulation slots within a preset, and it's roughly divided in thirds between the mod matrix and the sequencer of each of the synths within that preset. Now, the second answer to that question is, well, is that all we can ever get? And the answer to that is no. There is untapped potential. There is additional capacity to do more modulations than the safe limit that we started out with. And it's going to take us a little bit of time. We've got a few higher priorities right now. That's 20 modulations per layer is enough to do some damage for sure. And as we have the time to to really research it, we'll open that up as much as we safely can, consistent with having good, reliable performance. But we are not yet pushing the boundaries of that mod matrix, so look forward to more modulations in the indefinite future. At some point, that will happen. Moving right along, about modulation effects. They're always in mono, even on the master bus. Verbs and delays are in stereo, but not the mod effects. Is this by design? I'm assuming by modulation effects we mean like choruses and flangers and phasers. Let's assume that that's what we mean. I am going to have to double check on that. Yes, the synth effects, if you load it as an insert, those insert effects are mono because they have to be, because each voice itself is mono. They're mixed into a stereo field. Each voice gets a stereo pan position, but the voice itself is a mono thing. So the insert bus architecture for those mono voices is mono in, although it is stereo out, so the output of your effect is stereo. Now with the master effects bus, that master effects bus can be a single stereo effect, which is a true stereo input, and stereo output, or it can be two. If you have the master effects bus in dual mono mode, then definitely the input to each of the up to 2 effects you can have there is mono by design. My belief, which is unsubstantiated right now, this is another one where I'm going to have to consult with people who were more intimately related to this detail than I was. My belief is that if you have that master effects bus in stereo and you put a chorus on it, that is loaded as a stereo in, stereo out effect. Caveat, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I will research that and follow up somehow. I'm actually not sure how to follow up on questions that I need to provide more details about later when we're doing these live streams. I guess I'll probably be doing another live stream, and you can tune back in, and I'll try to throw back to the questions that still needed to be answered from the previous sessions. I don't know, we'll figure it out, or email us or hit us up on chat and ask the same question and say, hey, Amos said he'd look into this. One way or another, we'll make sure that you get the answer that you're looking for. So moving right along, still got a couple more questions. What does the Cat5 connection on the back panel do? That would be the Ethernet connection. What kind of expansion does it enable? Right now, that essentially, we use that during development. We use it here in-house as we're debugging, as we're developing. It doesn't immediately provide anything to the user today. That absolutely will not always be the case. There is abundant room for future expansion there. I'm going to have to be a little bit coy because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. The basic idea is that you will be able to do some kind of networked communication with the instrument, be it control or otherwise. The future includes really cool possibilities for that port. We're glad it's there. We're going to do cool stuff with it. But again, it's a little bit farther down the development timeline versus some of the really obvious stuff like completing the MIDI implementation, working on the effects gain issue as it was mentioned. That's a good segue into my list of known issues that we are still looking at. So full MIDI implementation is one. External clock sync is a huge one. I know a lot of people are waiting for that. Thank you for whatever modicum of patience you still have. We're on it. I want this thing to be a super well synchronized, beat sync all the things to my project. That's really important. It's high on our list. I may even be working on that myself in the next couple of weeks. So that's actively in development. MIDI is actively in development. I should probably mention one of our key firmware engineers that's been working on the MIDI system is currently on a very well-deserved vacation after months of overtime, constant work. He is trekking in Nepal right now. So we wish him well, and he'll be back here safely soon. Some of the MIDI work may be a little bit slower than it would otherwise be if he wasn't in the Himalayas, but I'm happy for him. I'm glad he got to do it, and I know he will be coming back here with renewed vigor and enthusiasm. So just mentioning that as an aside while we're actively working on his code. So other outstanding issues that we know about that we're working on, a lot of these are, we're prioritizing and figuring out how many of these things we can get into a 1.0.3 very quickly, because we do want to keep the pace of updates rolling along briskly as we're doing this initial sort of detailing and finishing out. So on that list is implementing the sequencer tie behavior. Sequencer, when you tie two notes together, we want to make sure that it's always using the same hardware voice for that. That gets you your legato glide behavior. It gets you a lot of little details that just make a tied note in a polyphonic step sequencer work the way you think it should work. That's very close. MIDI input, as of the last firmware update, each synth can be set to its own MIDI in channel, so you can have each part responding to MIDI from a different channel from your sequencer, which is awesome. Small thing that we need to address is that the keyboard range, when you set a split or layer, when you set the keyboard range for each part, the MIDI in is not respecting that keyboard range. It'll play any notes that you send it on this MIDI channel that synth is listening to. So that's an easy fix that's coming up very soon. Also on the list is velocity modulation of the envelopes. This is carried over from, this is still on the to-do list. It was identified in the previous firmware update. Basically the scaling, when you use velocity to modulate an envelope, it kind of clips off at the bottom. It can change the shape of the envelope. It can make the sustain level go silent in a way that there's a slight offset that's incorrect. So we know about that, and we'll be fixing it. That's on my wish list for the next version, but I'm not personally the person that's going to be fixing that. So we'll figure it out, but we'll get that as soon as we can. Going down the list here, on my list, effects level inconsistencies. We talked about that. We're actively working on that. MIDI notes out from the keyboard. If you play as slow as humanly possible, you can get a MIDI note out with a velocity of 0. That is incorrect, because that's actually a shorthand for a note off. So if you're playing super, super quietly, you might not get a MIDI note out. Easy fix. That will be dealt with in short order. Let's see, there's the panel focus. If you have multiple synths selected in panel focus, and you go to a more page and you try to adjust some soft knobs, it'll only adjust the synth that is in closest focus, the one that it's showing you on the screen, and not the other synth or synths that you have selected in the background. Definitely going to fix that. Not sure about again, all of these are not, just to be clear, this is not a list of what will definitely be fixed in the very next firmware update. This is what we're working on, and we want to roll out the next firmware update as soon as we can with everything that we have fixed in a timely fashion. And things that we're still working on, we'll keep them on the list of known issues and strike them off as quickly as we can. Another big one that I know people out there are missing is a working USB MIDI driver for Windows. That was a little, we didn't anticipate that. The USB MIDI code, nominally class compliant, should just work on OS X, should just work on Windows. Just works on OS X, doesn't just work on Windows. We got a little more work to do there. We might need a driver. This is not our first rodeo. We've done USB MIDI drivers for Windows before, and we have someone on hand right now to help make that happen. So that'll be coming ASAP and is currently in development. That's the contents of this Post-it note. Now, we got more questions coming in, so I'll go back to that. All right, I'll go ahead and answer the question that I said I skipped last time. Why is the Moog One better than other polysynths? Man, that puts me in an awkward position. You can compare specs of instruments. You can compare sound of instruments. I'm honestly I think that an instrument should have the right specs for what you want it to do musically, but I don't think that one spec sheet makes an instrument better than another instrument that has a different spec sheet. That's like specsmanship, and it's a really popular thing to do on internet forums. I've done it myself. I would encourage people not to think about musical instruments that way. These are, these are conduits for your creativity. These are tools for creative expression. What makes the best instrument is the one that makes you soar the highest and feel the best and get your ideas out the most easily and fluidly. And all we can do is try to understand what facilities will help to make that happen. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. And people like different sounds, and people like making different sounds and playing using different techniques. And there's no best in that. It's what's best is what's best for you. Now, there are all kinds of reasons why the Moog One is amazing and awesome, and it sounds great, and it has this incredible UI that is like more person hours of intense thought have gone into how to make this intuitive and easy and fun and deep and powerful all at the same time. One of our goals was to make the deepest and richest possible synthesizer toolkit that was still just like one layer deep and totally easy to navigate and intuitive to work on and create ideas on. And I hope we've succeeded. I've seen a lot of feedback that suggests that people get that and they respond to that and they like it a lot. So those are some reasons why the Moog One is really good. But is it better or best? That's a personal decision that I can't make for anybody else. I just hope you like it. Moving on. Does the sequencer respond to the XY pad when recording parameters live? You cannot record the XY pad into the sequencer the same way you can't record the mod wheel into the sequencer, but there is a really good reason for that. If you go to the step edit page and you go to modulations, I'm going to hit the step mod button and just wiggle the ladder filter. And so as I do that, I'm writing offset values I'm writing tweaks to the ladder filter cutoff in the sequence. So that's standard. So far so good. That's what it does. But I want to just mention that if you select a row of modulations and you press the encoder switch, you press down on the main encoder, you'll see that the title bar of that lane is highlighted. And so now you can see ladder filter cutoff is highlighted there. And pressing that button, pressing the main encoder toggles that on or off. So while a row of modulations is highlighted, the soft knobs on the bottom allow you to attach a controller and an amount to that row of modulation. And what that's for is it allows you to create a sequenced row of tweaks for a parameter, and then by attaching a controller like mod wheel or like the XY pad, pad XY or pressure, any of the real-time controllers basically, you can use it to dynamically control the amount of that sequenced modulation that's going to play back. So if you attach the mod wheel and set the amount to 100%, then when you bring the mod wheel all the way up, you get that sequenced modulation. And when you bring the mod wheel all the way down, it's gone. You don't hear the effect of that modulation. So you can create sequences of modulation of individual parameters and then perform how much of that modulation sequence you're going to hear using a real-time controller like the XY pad or like the mod wheel. And so that's a very fun thing to do. If you didn't know about it, now you know. Windows 10 USB status, in process. We got a guy. We're working on it. Next question, when you set the filter to series mode, can you change the signal order of the SVF and the ladder? Unfortunately, there is one so if you could do that, that would mean that you'd have the filters in series, but the ladder filter is first. Sound goes from the mixer into the ladder filter into the SVF. That flexibility is not there. You know, we decided on a topology, and it's mixer into state variable filter into ladder when they're in series. That is the series configuration that we have. Next question, can you route out audio to a CV? And that's the CV outputs on the back of the instrument. Can audio be a source for those? I don't believe that it can. Certainly right now, today, that is not an option. I would suggest that if you want to use audio as a CV, that you just use the direct outputs, the inserts. You can route audio to those, and you know, audio is a voltage on a wire. CV is a voltage on a wire. If you plug audio into a CV input, it'll wiggle. You might just need to make it louder. You might need to run it through an amplifier to make it wiggle across enough volts to do CV things. So that's an easy way to do that right now. If it makes sense, maybe we can add that, but again, you might you will definitely get the best results of your audio signal if you just take an audio output and buffer it and patch it to a CV input. That's just a thing that works. All right, more questions. Will snapshots carry over if you install someone else's user space? The answer is yes. This is worth mentioning. You may or may not have noticed that if you save a bunch of snapshots within a preset and then you just export that preset, it does not export the snapshots. It just exports the top level, the official version of that preset. And that's specifically if you're exporting individual presets. If you export an entire user space, it's really everything. It's exactly what you had on your instrument, including all the snapshots associated with all the presets. So yes, if you export a user space, you do get snapshots traveling along with that. And lastly, at least for now, there's a question about the ducking regarding the individual voices and the background noise level, et cetera. Does that equal a noise gate? No, I would say, maybe it's debatable. I wouldn't call it a noise gate. What it is right now, it's about a 12 dB decrease in the output level when a voice is not playing. And that's dynamic, it follows the voice envelope, but it does not absolutely turn anything on or off. And it's also a noise gate. Typically, a noise gate is something that you would put like on the mixed, the main output of an instrument. And if it's playing, then the noise gate is open. If it's not playing or it's below some threshold, the noise gate is closed. What we're doing currently is not operating on the mixed main output, although we could also do that. Like, we have the technology, we could put a soft noise gate on the mixed main output also, if it's cool to do that. That is one of two additional sort of gain control, signal-to-noise ratio improvement ideas that are actively in development. I would say we're looking at that. You know, we're rolling these things out as we're satisfied that they are that they're good and that they're what we want. And the stuff that we're still testing, I'm trying not to talk too much about, again, because I don't want to overpromise something or promise that we're going to do a thing and then we try it out, we do some more research and we find that it wasn't the best approach and we end up not doing it. You know, I don't want to look like a chump, so I'm not going to be too detailed on things that we're not certain about yet. But I will try to keep you as informed as I can, as our experiments bear fruit and as things actually get in the queue for addition. The next question about that, there was a second part to that question, which is this ducking, is this gain control, is it user adjustable? And the answer is not in version 1.0.2, but we will be adding some user control of this feature that is already in the plans for the next update. So right now it is what it is. I like it a lot. Everybody who tested it here likes it a lot. I hope you like it a lot, but if you have any concerns, you want more of it, less of it, turn it off, turn it on, that's coming very soon in the next update. All right, I think we are out of questions, and I think I'm out of stuff to talk about. I guess this is sort of the last call for questions for this round. I'm not going anywhere just yet. So I'm going to hang out and load a random sound and make some noise for just a second here. I'm not a huge fan of that sound. I'm going to try a different one. Factory presets. A factory preset in the A's, one that most people have probably heard already. That's okay. All right, we've got some more questions coming in. There's a problem with serious detuning on unison patches. Sometimes it works, sometimes it goes crazy. Thanks for letting us know. I haven't encountered that myself, but that just might mean I haven't pushed it hard enough. So I will go back to the lab and try my hardest to make unison detune go crazy. And if it goes crazy in a way that we didn't intend or we don't like, we'll make it go differently crazy, better crazy. All right, next question. After the 1.01 update, the unison is really out of tune, if that makes sense. Seems to happen on layered patches which have unison enabled. I assume that you've tried adjusting the unison detune parameter on those sounds, or if you're saying that maybe the unison detune is different in 1.01 than it was in 1.00. If the unison is different in 1.01 on presets that were saved in 1.00, one possible answer is that something was wrong in 1.0 that we actually fixed in 1.01, so that a given setting sounded a certain way that it shouldn't have sounded in the first place, and now it sounds the way that it always should have sounded. Now that doesn't help if you parked the parameter somewhere that you liked in 1.0 and now it sounds different in 1.01. I'll look at that, I'll do some comparison. I know that we fixed some legitimate bugs in unison, but they aren't related to how detuned it is at a given setting. So that's a new bug report, and I will look into it, and I really appreciate you mentioning that. Always let us know these things, hit us up on chat, email us, ask questions in the live streams just like you just did. That's perfect. It all helps us to, suss everything out and make the instrument as good as it can possibly be. Next question, can I play a slow sequence of filter knob adjustments and get smooth voltages, or does it instantly snap to the values per step? I'm actually going to add that. That is not currently on the to-do list, but what you're describing is a way of applying a slew or a ramp or a gradual change in the value of a per step parameter change. The short answer is right now it steps. It snaps from the setting on this step to the setting on this step, and you want it to ramp in between them. That needs to be added if it is to exist, but it's absolutely doable, and we have talked about it. I even remember talking about that in one of the live streams I did with Kurt Bevan, who is one of the people with whom we work the most closely to implement all that stuff. And he said, oh yeah, we could totally do that. So I will add that to the list, and that's a great feature. It's going to be really fun to be able to do slewed recorded sequence modulations. Can't do it yet, but it is on the list as of now. Schedule to be determined, but it'll happen. All right, boy, more questions are coming in. This is super awesome. All right, next question is the CV input bipolar, and can it be routed to any mod destination? Yes, CV input is -5 to +5 volts, and that all the CV inputs are directly available as mod sources and in the mod matrix, and can be routed to any destination in the mod matrix. So yes, that is already working as of now, requires no setup. All right, and I am just going to turn off my phone so that it stops bothering me. I apologize for that. Should have done that earlier, totally meant to. Can't do that. All right, let's see. All right, awesome. All right, more questions are coming just as fast as we can write them down. So, however, it takes non-zero time to write down questions. So I've just got to wait in eager anticipation until, here it is. I've noticed that if there is no detune, you can still get individual oscillators detuned. That's true. There are a variety of ways in which that's true. So I'm not entirely certain, actually that's, I'm not entirely certain what additional information is desired there. If you think that anything is detuned in a way that it shouldn't be, give us specifics, and we'll be happy to talk to somebody at Moog directly, go to our website, go to the live chat, send an email to service, get in touch with someone one-on-one if something is happening that you are perplexed by or that you think probably shouldn't be happening, and we can work with you individually to figure out what's going on. amplitude modulation, as in using the mixer oscillator levels as a mod destination. Totally. The mixer is made of VCAs. It's got 6 VCAs, 1 per sound source, and they're mod destinations. It's as simple as grabbing a modulation source. Now, this is a case where probably you would wish you could use the oscillators as modulation sources. I get that, and we'll see. But the LFOs can run up to 1 kilohertz, and they can track pitch. So if you want a key tracking audio rate mod source, the LFOs can be that for you, and it's trivially easy to press a destination button on an LFO, grab a mixer level knob, and you're now doing amplitude modulation. And you can do it at whatever rate you want, at whatever depth you want. Pro tip, sometimes it helps once you've assigned that modulation to turn the actual knob to 0 so that the default level without modulation is 0, and then the LFO is bringing that up and down. LFOs can be unipolar or bipolar, meaning they can swing entirely from 0 to 1, or they can swing from -1 through 0 to 1. Depending on whether you're using a unipolar or bipolar LFO, it might determine where you want the baseline mixer level to be relative to what that LFO is doing to it. Is it opening it, is it only pushing it in the positive direction, or is it pushing it both positive and negative? All of those options exist and are available to you, and will give you slightly different sounds, so it's all there. But yes, the mixer is a bunch of VCAs that you can modulate, so go nuts. And I think we might be out of questions for now. So this has been awesome. Thank you everyone very much. If anything is, if you still have questions, hit us up in all the ways that I've mentioned along the way. Keep in touch with us. We're here to make things awesome, and you help us do that. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next time.